Merci beaucoup for inviting me to share this research. Today, I'm going to be talking about the role of local communities in river restoration, a case study of Native American tribes and dam removal. The relationship between Native Americans and dams in the US has been historically characterized by displacement and marginalization, as illustrated by the destruction of tribal fisheries at Celilo Falls after the construction of the Dalles Dam on the Columbia River. However, this is changing. More than 1,700 dams have been removed from rivers in the US. Tribes have played and continue to play a key role in many dam removals, bringing cultural, economic, and legal resources to bear on the process. So this research investigates tribal involvement in dam removals with case studies from the Ottaway, Penobscot, and Elwha Rivers, asking, what role has tribal involvement played in successful removals, and how does dam removal affect and reflect shifting power relations between tribes and non-tribal actors? The research draws on a political ecology of indigeneity approach. The approach frames the politics of dam removal as a type of resource conflict, while remaining attentive to important cultural and spiritual dimensions of rivers for tribal communities. This is important because it helps to move beyond essentialist descriptions of the relationship between tribes and ecosystems in order to offer insights into the complex ways that indigeneity has been entangled with nature conservation. It creates opportunities to consider more relational and non-dualistic understandings of human-environment relations. In other words, the framework facilitates a nuanced consideration of both political and cultural dimensions of dam removal. There are a number of ways that tribes become involved in dam removal in the US, and a number of dimensions that underpin tribal involvement. So there are cultural dimensions, and these create a high degree of motivation to pursue and follow through on projects. There are regulatory dimensions. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or the FERC, licenses and inspects non-federal hydro projects, and it has a tribal obligation, a tribal consultation obligation when dams impact tribal trust resources such as fisheries. This is a really important entry point for tribes to influence the removal process. There are political and legal dimensions. Tribes have treaty rights to salmon and other anadromous species that are threatened by dams. Federally recognized tribes can access funds for removals and river restoration. There are also institutional dimensions. Tribal natural resource departments offer scientific and technical support. So in practice, these issues are intertwined, as demonstrated by the removal of the Condit Dam on the White Salmon River in Washington State in 2011. The Yakama Nation negotiated a settlement with the dam owner during the FERC relicensing process. Fish passage to protect threatened and endangered steelhead and salmon would have been too expensive, so this motivated the dam owner to pursue removal. And the Yakama Nation was a co-sponsor on important engineering studies, and it also was involved officially in negotiating agreements for removal. Cultural resources were also important. So as a Yakama Nation elder points out, after 100 years, the river is being returned to the salmon and the Yakama people. We have been taught that when we fix the water, the traditional foods will follow. When we fix the White Salmon River, salmon, steelhead, and lamprey will follow. Our tribal members will be there to greet them because Ichitimani Ticham Iwanimi, this land is a part of us. The first case study comes from the Ottaway River in northwest lower Michigan. Its waters flow through a landscape of forest, fields, and towns before reaching West Grand Traverse Bay. It was the most comprehensive river restoration project in the history of Michigan State. The project involved the removal of Brownbridge Dam, Boardman Dam, and Sabine Dam, and the modification of a fourth. The restoration reconnected 160 miles of free-flowing cold water stream. And the politics of removal were primarily local, which I will explain shortly. The tribe was involved in many ways in this removal. Federal recognition was a key precursor to tribal involvement. So the tribe was re-recognized by the federal government in 1980, restoring political and legal rights. One right that the tribe had then was to start a casino, and this dramatically altered its financial situation, making more money available for natural resources management. FERC relicensing was also an entry point for tribal involvement. Brown Bridge Dam came up for relicensing in 2003. The dam owner decided it was too expensive to meet upgrade requirements. The Grand Traverse Band signed the settlement agreement and then had an official role in decommissioning decisions as a member of the implementation team. The tribe also provided key funding early in the process and at critical points to keep momentum going. That was over $2 million from the Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and other federal agencies. And these funds were available to the tribe as a federally recognized tribe. So as I mentioned before, the politics of this removal were primarily local. The resistance to removal was really about aesthetics, recreation, property values, concern about change. There was minimal hydropower generation. So the tribe engaged in these local politics, working to overcome resistance in the non-native community. They sponsored over 200 meetings with more than 1,000 participants. They shared responsibility and liability for dam removal problems, such as the accidental breach of Brown Bridge during drawdown. The river rose 4 feet in 45 minutes. That was supposed to happen over a course of days, but it flooded many riverside properties. And the Natural Resources Department worked with many government agencies and non-tribal partners throughout the removal process. The tribe also brought cultural resources to the removal. Water is a living and sacred being for the Grand Traverse Band. And river restoration was a healing process for the river ecosystem and the community as well. As Joanne Cook points out, we know the river has a voice through us and our work and the songs and ceremonies that we do on her behalf. In her words, we know that she's alive, that the water is alive. Next case focuses on the Penobscot River system, which is the second largest in New England, draining an area of 8,570 square miles before flowing into Penobscot Bay. The Penobscot Nation has been deeply affected by the decline in fisheries from dams and from industrial contamination of the river. This was one of the most ambitious dam removal and river restoration projects ever completed on the US Eastern Seaboard. The Vesey and Great Works dams were removed in 2012 and 2013 with a fish bypass constructed at Howland Dam. It opened up 2,000 miles of rivers and streams to 11 fish species such as Atlantic salmon and shad. The politics of removal were played out at a broader scale, more at the state scale. Tribal involvement, similar to the situation with the Grand Traverse Band, federal recognition paved the way for tribal involvement in removal. So the tribe was recognized in 1975, and this led to the Maine Indian Lands Claims Resettlement Act of 1980, requiring the federal government to ensure the protection of tribal resources, such as the right to fish within the waters of the reservation. FERC relicensing was also another entry point for tribal involvement. The dam owner was willing to work with the Penobscot Nation and other stakeholders to problem solve when the dams were up for relicensing. And this was probably in part because the tribe had been vocal about fish passage in earlier relicensing decisions around other dams on the river. And the dam owner was anticipating further demands from the tribe. The tribe and other stakeholders then formed the Penobscot River Restoration Trust, which negotiated the Lower Penobscot River Comprehensive Settlement, paving the way for the purchase of 3 dams for $25 million. So this was a very effective and creative strategy. The trust essentially bought the dams and then demolished them. And I would argue that the politics of dam removals played out at a broader scale, at the state scale in this case, in part because the Penobscot is Maine's largest river. It really extends across the state, and there are stakeholders across the state. There was some controversy over the loss of hydropower generation and concerns outside the basin about a loss of power. This turned out not to be a problem because the dam owners were able to generate more power at other existing dams. And the tribe engaged in politics at the state scale by becoming part of a collaboration or collaborative process with other agencies and organizations, such as the Natural Resources Council of Maine and Maine Audubon. So the tribe scaled up its politics. This also has ongoing consequences for Maine River politics. So Wabanaki tribes are currently advocating for removal of 4 dams on the Kennebec River in Maine, and they cite the Penobscot removals as a precedent. The Penobscot also brought cultural resources to the removal. The Penobscot are a river people. Their reservation comprises over 200 islands in the river. They've fished for more than 10,000 years in the waters of the Penobscot River. As one elder notes, a long time ago, the people lived along this river, as we do still now. We take our name, Bernerwurpskek, from a place on the river, and later the entire river took its name from us. Our ancestral home was a vast network of rivers, lakes, and streams that connected the land with the ocean. In the center of this land stands Katahdin, our sacred mountain, that watches over our land and guides the people while on the river. The people have been here since time immemorial. The final case study is the Elwha River, which flows for 45 miles from glaciers in the Olympic Mountains to the Strait of Juan de Fuca. It is the least developed of these 3 case studies, or the basin is the least developed, with its watershed being almost entirely within Olympic National Park. Before the construction of dams in the early 20th century, the river produced nearly 400,000 salmon and sea trout. By the early 2010s, there were fewer than 3,000 wild fish in the river. The Elwha and Glines Canyon dams were removed in 2012 and 2014, the largest dam removal in US history. It gave fish access to more than 70 miles of pristine spawning habitat protected within Olympic National Park. And the politics of removal here were the broadest of the 3 case studies. They extended to the regional and the national scale. Tribal involvement, again, similar to the other 2 cases, federal recognition was a key way in which tribes became involved in dam removal, even though they had been fighting these dams ever since they were built. After recognition in 1968, the tribe intensified its efforts to remove the dams. Also important was a court decision, the 1974 Bolt decision. So it determined that tribes were entitled to half the fish in Washington state, and securing those rights required a restored river. The tribe always insisted on full ecosystem restoration. FERC relicensing, once again, a very important entry point for the tribes into the removal process. The tribe became engaged in relicensing decisions beginning in the 1970s, and they were the first intervener to officially call for dam removal. The tribe used funds from the Bureau of Indian Affairs to produce their own research over and over again to prove that dam removal was the best environmental and economic decision. The politics of these removals played out at, as I mentioned, regional and national scales, and the tribe then became involved in politics at these scales. This was the most protracted and contentious of the 3 case studies. There were jurisdictional complications, a resistant dam owner, and tensions around natural resource issues not directly related to the dam. For example, there had been many conflicts over old growth logging on the peninsula, and those politics actually affected the resistance to dam removal in this case. The tribe dealt with actors well outside the basin and was involved in political processes at all scales. And again, natural resource issues can be highly politicized in the American West. The tribe took the lead in creating the joint fisheries and wildlife agencies to increase political effectiveness by working with other stakeholders and government actors. So it scaled up its activities as well. And this also, this removal has implications for many other removals in the West involving tribes, such as the Snake River dams, which people are tribes are calling for their removal, or the dams in the Klamath River Basin in Oregon. Also, there are benefits to having a higher profile dam removal process to involving actors at other scales. It can create complications, but at the same time, when Congress became involved, it passed the Elwha River Ecosystem and Fisheries Restoration Act. And this basically called for the full restoration of the Elwha River ecosystem and native anadromous fisheries. So essentially authorizing dam removal, even though it didn't happen for 20 years. So there are both problems and benefits to having more actors involved in this removal. The tribe also brought cultural resources to this dam removal. Salmon are deeply, deeply important to their way of life. And the river that sustains salmon is incredibly important to this tribe. We cherished it and we respected it. We didn't waste it. We used every bit of it. It was a gift from our creator. It was our culture and heritage. We are the salmon people. Our culture is built around salmon. So back to the research question about how this is affecting and reflecting changing power relations. Dam removal in the US is an opportunity for tribes to exercise political power. And they are very savvy actors in the political realm. Tribal involvement reflects changing power relations. Tribes are becoming more powerful as a result of treaty rights, leveraging treaty rights to pressure decision makers. This is a power source totally different from that of other agencies or private groups. Tribes increasingly draw on their legal right to intervene in the FERC relicensing process, and they are also increasingly committing resources available to them as federally recognized tribes to initiate and pursue dam removal. In this regard, dam removals function as tribal restoration projects. They are part of an effort to restore cultural tradition, sovereignty, and self-reliance. Dam removal also affected power relation between tribes and the wider community, elevating the role of tribes in natural resource management. Tribes brought expertise by leading feasibility studies, monitoring ecological outcomes of the dam removals. Tribes pursued partnerships with non-tribal stakeholders, gaining visibility, respect from the wider community through day-to-day collaborations and alliances. And tribal involvement created an opportunity for a different set of values and resource claims to inform decision-making around river restoration. As one participant in the non-native participant in the Ottaway River project noted, I have always admired the Native Americans for their philosophy as far as how they treat Mother Earth. But to meet these folks and work side by side with them has really been an honor. Tribes also affected the nature and practice of river restoration through dam removal. Each case, importantly, involved more than one dam removal. In each basin, tribes were concerned with river restoration at broad spatial and temporal scales. It was never just about dam removal as an end in and of itself. Tribal involvement in dam removal helps to make the projects more temporally and spatially inclusive, restoring human river and human non-human relationships in the process. For each case, ancestors as well as future generations were integral to the process of river restoration. As a Penobscot elder notes, the Penobscot Nation is committed to continue our efforts until the fish, wildlife, and plants are safe to eat and the sacredness is restored to the river. Only then will our culture be whole again. Only then will harmony be restored within the sacred circle of life. So all of this suggests the possibility for new relationships with rivers through tribal involvement. The involvement of tribes in dam removal creates opportunities for opening up new political spaces across scales to debate how nature is valued, protected, and lived with. As a member of the lower Elwha Clay LM notes, the river is free, the salmon are returning, but removing the dams is not the end. It's the beginning of something. It's still a figuring out process. We changed the world. The environment is being reestablished. Now we have to figure out what to do with that. Merci beaucoup.